The Denver Broncos blast the Joe Burrow-less Cincinnati Bengals in primetime action. And the Broncos, they unlocked their run game. We'll break it all down here on today's episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Victory! Cue up the Johnny Drama soundbite as the Denver Broncos blast the Cincinnati Bengals on Monday Night Football to improve to 2-2 on the season. Welcome into another episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, where you know it's your team every day. We got a post-game recap coming your way here. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter from Mile High Sports, joined as always by Sayre Bedinger, site expert over there, predominantlyorange.com. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app here. And here's what you're going to get on today's episode of the show: a post-game report, a victory episode for you here in primetime action as the Broncos dominate the Bengals 28-3. JK Dobbins in the ground game led this team to a dominant fourth quarter performance there. And the Broncos snapped a long-standing streak that we talked about in our pregame show. Plus, Denver's defense, they blistered Jake Browning and the Bengals offense all evening long. And then we'll hand out our game balls to a handful of players who stood out and made some plays on Monday Night Football. Sayre, what a victory here for this Denver Broncos team. What a game. You know, I think early on here, you had the lightning delay early on, but the game started on time initially here. The Broncos, they came out focused, and they came out on a mission here, and they're able to move the ball offensively. They're able to get stops defensively here. It was a little interesting at first as Riley Moss had his first matchup against T. Higgins, but let's start off with the offensive side of the ball. Bo Nix and the Broncos, after a performance that they had against the Chargers last week, man, did they need a bounce-back performance here in Week 4, and they did just that.
They definitely did. And you mentioned it, Cody, too, that everything didn't get off to necessarily the best overall start for the Denver Broncos. I mean, a lot of knee-jerk reactions immediately to start this game. But, man, if we only could have known what would happen as the game would go along, right? Because the Broncos racked up over 500 yards of offense. That's something this team has not done since the Peyton Manning era. And it was kind of a, bingo card of everything that you would hope for offensively in the game. You got a 300-yard performance from Bo Nix. We ended that ugly streak that you talked about with JK Dobbins finally running for over 100 yards. You got both backs involved in this one, and you dominated on the ground. In fact, the two guys who had rushing touchdowns in this game, Cody, were not even JK Dobbins and RJ Harvey. It was Marvin Mims and Bo Nix getting rushing TDs. So you spread the wealth all over the place. You had no sacks for the offensive line and Bo Nix there working together. So when you kind of talk about it in terms of the overall broad picture of the game, it's pretty much everything that we've wanted to see from this Denver Broncos offensive unit. Third down efficiency, red zone efficiency, other than the one turnover. And then obviously, just productivity every single drive and on a per play basis. Really, really good stuff from the Broncos offensively in this one.
Yeah, to go to your third down point, the Broncos were 8 of 14 on third down specifically. That was great. They had good efficiency, I think, on the early downs as well. They had a few situations where they'd have a big play. It got called back by penalties. We'll talk about that later as the week goes on. We don't want to sour a post-game report here with some of the negative stuff that necessarily stood out here. We're going to celebrate the victory here. But I love the ground game. Now, I will say I was a little frustrated that opening the second half, they didn't come out and try to run the ball necessarily right away. You had 3 passing attempts to 2 rushing attempts. I know I'm nitpicking here, but, between J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey going into halftime, J.K., I think, had 12 total carries and R.J. had 8 at that point, or the balance, it was pretty solid there, and it was working. I mean, we even saw right before the 2-minute, the Broncos were able to move the ball downfield by running the football. The Bengals defense was gassed, and then Sean Payton got a little too cute and fancy in the red zone there on 4th and 2. Pound the rock inside. But the Broncos, they got the ball back, and Bo Nix, man, you talk about a bounce-back game for him. When he sets his feet, good things happen. I think we saw him more calm in the pocket here on Monday night. I don't think we saw him climb up and launch himself forward and oversell passes the way that we saw in the first few weeks of the season. We saw more of an emphasis on drop backs, set your feet, good foundation, and fire. And man, his connection to Cortland Sutton on that touchdown, that was an incredible play with very, very tight coverage across the board. The window that Bo just threw that into was perfect, and it helped kind of set the tone for the rest of the evening.
It did. And a couple of plays before that, the throw to Marvin Mims, that was also a tight window throw in a 2-minute drill. Really good stuff from Bo Nix, especially when you throw an interception in the tight red zone, right? I mean, you come back down the field, you get almost a mulligan to say, all right, well, you got to start a lot further back now, but you're going to get another chance at it. He was aggressive. He was hunting with the football. You love to see that from your quarterback, just the utmost confidence. And to the questions of maybe whether or not Sean Payton has real confidence in Bo Nix, Cody, that was a question as of last. I mean, I think we saw in this game, they unleashed Bo Nix a little bit. He still threw the ball despite the success that they had offensively. Cody, he still threw the ball 42 times in this game, 42 passing attempts, 326 yards on the day, a 97.9 rating in this one. So obviously a lot of really good stuff from Bo Nix. We saw a designed running play to Bo Nix. We saw obviously he's for a touchdown run. So everything that you would have wanted to see from Bo in this game, aside from that red zone interception that you wish you could have that whole play back to just pound the rock a little bit there. Aside from that one play, this was exactly the type of rebound that he needed coming off of a game in which many were questioning, like, does this guy really have what it takes? I know it's a difference between Jesse Minter's Chargers defense, and now you're talking about the Bengals defense with Al Golden. Very different personnel, very different abilities. The Bengals just got destroyed last week. Their confidence is down, but the Broncos did what you have to do against a defense whose confidence is down, and that's just completely dominate in every phase of the game.
100% too, because if the Broncos offense struggled and Bo didn't look good against this Bengals team, then those conversations, that chirping that we see so often on social media, that would have amplified here. I just thought it was a great response from Bo in the offense, specifically on third down. A commitment to the run game was obviously the key. And really, I loved how much other guys got involved. I mean, we talk about the passing game here, Sayre. You had multiple guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys for the Broncos who caught passes and had at least 20-plus yards here. And obviously, Cortland Sutton was the leading receiver here once again, but good production from Marvin Mims, great production from Troy Franklin, and a couple of missed opportunities. Honestly, when you go back and watch, Troy Franklin could have probably had over 100-plus yards in this game on 2 downfield throws that he's certainly going to want back ultimately here. But I just felt like this was a game where the Broncos offense played clean enough that we're sitting here in a post game and there's not anything lingering that we're worried about necessarily. I feel like this was a win that was very satisfying. The Broncos did exactly what they should do against a team that they should do this with. And now the test for this offense is going to come this week against a team with a winning record. And the Bengals had a winning record in this game coming into it, obviously at 2-1 here. But now you face a perennial Super Bowl contender, obviously in the defending Super Bowl champ Philadelphia Eagles. So this was a good game, I feel like, for the offense to maybe grease the wheels a little bit because they're going to need it against Philadelphia.
They are. And I think that what the Bengals did early in this game offensively was attacking the Broncos corners once again. I mean, we've seen teams be doing that this season, especially Riley Moss. I wish I would have started counting from the very beginning, Cody, because we had all that talk about Riley going into the start of this game. I think the Eagles, especially with A.J. Brown sending out cryptic tweets and things like that, I think the Eagles are going to try to get their receivers involved early in this one. So that's something that the Broncos are going to have to obviously watch for.
Did I miss something? What, cryptic tweets?
Yeah, he was posting something out there that somebody's like, you got to really read into the A.J. Brown is posting stuff. So you got to really read into it because he puts a lot of thought into this. I can't remember exactly what it was, but you got to go look it up.
Was it about Riley Moss or something, or the Denver DBs?
No, it had nothing to do with Denver's DBs. It had.
I was like, man, he's talking
to do. No, he's not. I think he was talking to maybe sending messages because Nick Sirianni had to address it in a press conference. They were asking him like, hey, what does it mean? He's like, we know he wants to get the ball and make plays. So that's what I'm kind of talking about to circle it back is like, hey, the Eagles are probably going to make a concerted effort to get their receivers the ball in this coming game. So to your point about Philly this week, going to be another tough test for the Denver Broncos who, you know what? They haven't played their best against top competition. They've embarrassed us all in front of Jim Nantz and Tony Romo. So this is their chance now to go out and get a little more redemption.
Yeah, well, and look, the Broncos' defensive backfield is going to have their hands full. They faced a tough test on Monday Night Football with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and they answered the call in this matchup here. We'll recap the defense's dominant performance led by Nick Bonito and Riley Moss getting the last laugh here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos post-game report is brought to you by our friends over there at Mizzen and Main. And you know the saying, look good, feel good. The problem is that most dress clothes only check one of those boxes. They look sharp, but they feel stiff, hot, and high maintenance. That's why there's Mizzen and Main. And I'm rocking a Mizzen and Main right now. Love Mizzen and Main. Bo Nix is a big proponent of Mizzen and Main as well. He wears their clothing on game days, and I wear it as well. Mizzen and Main makes classic menswear with performance fabrics, so it's effortless to look sharp and feel comfortable. They actually invented the performance fabric dress shirt over 10 years ago, and they've perfected it ever since. Like I said, I wear Mizzen and Main. I have pants, I have polos, I have dress shirts. It's the most comfortable clothing that I own. And right now, Mizzen and Main is offering our listeners 20% off your first purchase at mizzenandmain.com with promo code LOCKEDON NFL20. That's Mizzen, spelled M-I-Z-Z-E-N, and Main, MAIN.com. Promo code LOCKEDON NFL20 for 20% off. If you'd rather shop in person, you can find Mizzen and Main stores in select states. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And coming into Monday Night Football, we all know the Denver Broncos. They were 7.5-point home favorites against the Cincinnati Bengals without Joe Burrow, and they delivered. And FanDuel wants to make sure that you capitalize on an offer that you simply can't miss out on, because right now new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet. Put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Like we told you last week, if you put the $5 on the Broncos money line and they won here tonight, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets guaranteed. So enjoy that for your week 5 slate of NFL games coming up this week as well inside of the FanDuel app. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started.
The Denver Broncos defense, they did their job against a backup quarterback in Jake Browning of the Cincinnati Bengals, and we talked about it this past week on Locked On Broncos. The 50 is the end zone. Well, guess what, Broncos Country? That Denver defense did not allow a single play on their side of the field after the first drive the Bengals had in this game. We're going to break down the Bengals and Broncos as far as the Broncos' defensive performance on today's episode. Post-game W. Come on, everybody, celebrate that W. Let us know your players of the game, all those sorts of things. But we appreciate you all so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Cody, the defense, I think maybe we had these grandeur ideas of them going out there, and I mean, Jake Browning threw 5 interceptions in his first 7 quarters this season. So, hey, go out there, get a couple of picks off of this guy, defensive touchdown or 2 for being a little greedy out there. But ultimately, it was all about just getting off the field quickly in this game. You and I talked about that. Don't let them pass the 50. Well, in that regard, the Denver defense really did their job in this game.
Yeah, they did. And I'd say almost every key to victory you and I touched on in our pregame show really came to fruition. It's rare that ever happens where it's like a perfect storm of circumstances, but that's exactly the case there. I know you had the Broncos rushing for over 150 yards. That was one of those keys. And yes, they nailed that. They hit that defensively. It was being able to cover guys like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase on those money downs, third down, Sayre, to be specific here. And the Broncos defense, man, they did their job after giving up 8 of 17 to Justin Herbert and the Chargers last week. They held the Cincinnati offense on third down to 2 of 11. And you don't know what's crazy about this. It was really inverted, the Broncos defense this week and the Broncos offense, to what happened last week against the Chargers. The Broncos offense had 29 total first downs offensively. The Bengals only had 9 first downs all evening long here. And a lot of that was because Jake Browning, as you mentioned, with the turnovers that he's had so far, they came out with a quick passing game, which meant that they didn't have a lot of time for him to stand back there and throw. And certainly the Broncos, in times where he tried that, they got home. Nick Bonito, Jonathan Cooper, John Franklin Myers, those guys dominated off the edge here. But let's talk about the story that we talked about coming into this matchup. Riley Moss getting a little bit of revenge here. Now, first series of the game, He has tightly contested coverage on T. Higgins, who makes a fantastic play, catch on a back shoulder. And I already saw the tweets. I already had people tweeting me saying, oh, look at Riley Moss. I can't believe this. And Riley Moss got the last laugh in this game here because he also had a couple of coverage plays downfield against Jamar Chase. T. Higgins here once again. And ultimately, T. Higgins finished this game 3 catches for 32 yards on 6 targets. Riley got the last laugh in this game, had pretty good coverage. And that's one thing, too, that was just like this Broncos D at one point, they switched it up a little bit. I don't know if you saw that as the game was going on, but there's times where Riley's covering Jamar and there's times where Pat's covering T, and they did a really good job, I think, of bracket covering those guys in key passing situations. The way that they handled it in the passing game, I think, was brilliant here for the Broncos defensively. They did exactly what we wanted them to do against this unit.
Absolutely, like we talked about, and it's worth mentioning again because, like you said, the numbers kind of mirrored what the Bengals did this week. Cody, 9 first downs offensively and 2 of 11 on third downs. That's pretty much exactly what the Broncos. I think that's what the Broncos had last week against the Chargers, or pretty close to that. And they were only able to score 3 points, and the Broncos were able to get 20 last week. So it's kind of crazy when you think about those sorts of numbers and how it breaks down because, yeah, it felt like the Bengals had 9 first downs, and it felt like they pretty much all came on that first drive of the game. Now, was it perfect by any means? No, but the Broncos came through with some clutch plays when they need it. You got a sack from Nick Bonito. You got a sack from John Franklin Myers. You got some big plays from your defensive front there. Some really great pass rush from Jonathan Cooper, who also drew a holding penalty, I believe. So I wish those showed up for those guys. You know, when you're talking about sacks and you're talking about QB hits, I wish there was a holding penalties drawn stat that showed up in the box score because those guys should get paid for drawing holding penalties. But Jonathan Cooper, those guys, Cody, they bring the hustle, they bring the effort, and you love to see them making those game-changing plays because ultimately the Broncos, they needed that in this game. They needed those sacks because that Bengals punter was flipping the field and making it difficult for Denver's offense. Broncos offense should have had 40-plus points in this game. I think the only reason they didn't is because of Cincinnati's punter.
He was the only bright spot, I would say, for them in this matchup, in this game, all game long. Let's go to some interesting numbers here from our friends over there, NFL Next Gen Stats. Pat Surtain against Jamar Chase. Pat Surtain, the second, allowed just a single reception for 8 yards on 3 targets across 13 matchups against Jamar Chase, including 0 catches on 10 matchups in man-to-man coverage. Once again, PS2 winning the matchups here against Jamar Chase here. But Nick Bonito, once again, let's talk about his dominant rise and what we've seen from him so far this season. Man, he's the Energizer Bunny. He generated 6 pressures on 19 pass rushers. That's 31.6% of his rushing attempts, 1.5 sacks, and he's now generated 6 or more pressures in all 4 games this season. 3 of these pressures being under 2.5 seconds. Nick Bonito is playing dominant football right now, and so is Pat Surtain.
Yeah, Nick Bonito is so impressive, Cody. I mean, we threw this name out there this past week. I'll do it again. I'm not saying he's prime Von Miller, but I think when you talk about Von Miller stuff, I mean, Nick Bonito's got that burst off the edge, and now it's just about shifting that mentality and knowing he's going to get to the quarterback. So I've got to figure out ways now to take that ball away from these quarterbacks because I think that's where Nick Bonito's at. He's getting to the quarterback so easily these days. I mean, he really is. And he's creating opportunities for other guys. He's flushing the quarterbacks out. It's time for him to start taking advantage of those chances, but also the secondary as well. When they're getting these opportunities, the ball's coming out, Nick Bonito's closing in quick. I want to see that secondary be even a little bit more aggressive as well, attacking the football and anticipating some of these throws because ultimately Bonito, 4.5 sacks through 4 games. I mean, we might be talking about a 20-sack season here if he catches a little bit of fire.
And he very well could. I mean, that's a trend here. And what's impressive about the Broncos' defensive performance here, and obviously Bonito as well, is the Broncos, they blitzed Jake Browning on just 4 of 29 total dropbacks, obviously, which is their second lowest blitz rate in a game under Vance Joseph since 2023, according to Next Gen Stats. And it says here when rushing 4 or fewer, they generated 9 pressures and 3 sacks. So, I mean, that means your pass rush, your defensive linemen are doing a good enough job to open up one-on-ones with your outside linebackers. You're winning those one-on-one situations while sending four, and your coverage is holding up on the back end there. This was, once again, just very impressive here. And they're going to face a tough test this week against the Philadelphia Eagles. But, I mean, defensively, I agree with you, Sayre. You want to be able to see them build on this, especially going into a matchup against the defending Super Bowl champions. And you come out of this game pretty healthy for the most part, which is obviously a great sign there. And obviously there's so many guys I think that stood out in this game. We're going to hand out our game balls. We're going to be like Oprah. You get a game ball, you get a game ball, and you get a game ball. We're going to hand all that out here on today's Locked On Broncos post-game report. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at Rugiet Go Long. And what do you get when you have a bald eagle standing on top of a silverback gorilla riding a T-Rex? You get a Denver Broncos dominant defense, and you also get confidence, pure confidence. And if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Go Long. That's exactly where Rugiet Go Long comes in, because this isn't just another ED pill. It's a total game changer for confidence. Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications in one dual-action formula so you can get hard and go the distance. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to rugiet.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Make sure to use our code so that they know that we sent you. We're handing out game balls on today's Locked On Broncos post-game report. Another victory episode in store. We always like it when the Broncos win because everything is good in Broncos country. You know what's good? The production of a handful of players here, Sayre. I feel like there's so many game balls that we can hand out. I'm going to start off with you, my friend. Hand yours out. I know we've talked about some of these players, but there's some other guys that deserve some recognition.
Yeah, I want to start off by, I think, talking about a guy who was on my list of players to watch going into this game. And it's kind of a little bit of a deeper cut. There's some lower hanging fruit than this. But RJ Harvey, Cody, he got his first NFL touchdown. The Broncos schemed up a number of touches to get him the ball. We saw him build some confidence. We saw him make a really nice catch on a swing pass that went out to him and then get his eyes downfield. And quickly we see that vision come into play. We see the burst come into play. RJ Harvey was impressive in this game overall. He finished with 58 rushing yards, but also added 40 receiving yards and his first NFL touchdown, like I mentioned. So, Cody, we're 2 yards away there from 100 yards from scrimmage. And I know Sean Payton has talked about those Joker wings right there for RJ Harvey. But, man, if he hasn't gotten them yet, this was his first and biggest step towards getting them.
And I liked what we saw from him in yards after the catch. I mean, you saw, like, anytime he caught the ball in space and he's sizing up a defender, he's got this little shifty juke move to him that it's like, all right, you think the defender might actually have a chance, and then he just cuts inside and makes a move upfield. And he's also hard to bring down. I think that's one thing that stood out. I love that choice there. I'm going to give JK Dobbins a game ball, obviously, just for the evident, hey, you surpassed over 100 yards here. I just felt like the run game was really clicking with he and RJ, and I think collectively these two guys as a duo, they did a really good job of keeping the offense going, and I think providing life to this unit because, Sayre, what have we talked about all this offseason long, and even so far in the regular season? If this team can't find a way to run the football, they're not going to have a lot of success. And that was a little bit of a trend early on in the game where, like, if they can't run the football, they couldn't pick up 2 yards on 3rd and 2. We're like, well, it's going to be a long season. They bucked the trend there, and they got going, and it was nice to see against the defense that you needed to run the ball against. I think you could run the ball a little bit against Philadelphia, but they're stout. They got really good players at every level of the field defensively, so that's going to be a tough matchup. Can they carry this momentum over? JK, I'm going to give him a game ball.
I love that pick as well. I think anytime you can end a long-standing streak, a streak that's been ongoing for nearly 3 full calendar years at this point, that's pretty crazy. So, yeah, shout out to JK Dobbins for providing the Broncos offense the spark that it so desperately has needed in the running game. I mean, he has been exactly what we hoped that he could be based on what we saw last year early on with the LA Chargers. So, really good stuff from JK Dobbins. I'm going to give one out to Marvin Mims as well, Cody. I mean, man, this guy, he said it after the game. He's going to like playing against, it might be his favorite team to play against, the Cincinnati Bengals, because last year he caught those 2 clutch touchdowns for the Broncos. This year, he got a rushing touchdown, obviously getting involved in the passing game, 6 catches for 69 yards, from Marvin Mims Jr. in this game. The rushing touchdown from 16 yards out. Great block by Pat Bryant as well on that play, coming down flat, as Troy Aikman pointed out. Really good stuff. But Marvin, he's got that juice to him, and he was questionable coming into this game. He was late addition to the injury report. He came out swinging. He came out playing confident. And the Broncos, I think, Cody, here's my bold claim that I'm going to make. Marvin Mims has the best hands on the team. I think I've said it before, but I think he's got the best, he's just so natural out there. Catches the ball away from his body, makes difficult catches, great concentration. I think Marvin has the best hands on this Broncos team.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to give another receiver a game ball for what you just mentioned there. Pat Bryant, what a terrific block. 2 weeks in a row, Sayre, where Pat has had a huge block that has opened up a big play. Marvin's touchdown, JK's big-time run coming out of the second half of the Chargers game last week. Just a great attitude. And a guy, like, even if he's not catching passes or isn't getting the ball thrown to him, he is out there. He is blocking his tail off. And I hope that Sean Payton can find a way to reward him here very soon. I got to give him an honorary game ball here, but I'm going to go defensively here as well. I'm going to give a game ball to Jaquan McMillan. I think he kind of set the tone a little bit early on in this game because the Broncos, they started out defensively being on the field. And I think it was the very first play, he blew up a little quick pass there to, I think, intended for Jamar Chase, just took a great angle attacking outside. And I just think he played with presence, he and Jahdae Barron. But man, Jaquan's going to get a game ball here for me. Who else on the defensive side of the ball are you going to hand one out to?
Can I split one ball up? We'll deflate one
Go ahead.
We'll cut it in half.
Don't tell Tom Brady.
He's going to want to come back and play. I think that Nick Bonito and Jonathan Cooper, Cody, those two guys, they just are such tone setters off the edge. They each get half a game ball, or you can give them each a game ball, whatever you want to do. But in this game, combining for 4 quarterback hits, and then obviously they combined for 1 sack together, and Bonito himself had 1.5 sacks total. So
yeah,
I just love this pass rush duo. I think that you can go into every single week knowing what they bring to the table. They're so consistent. They don't have bad games at this point. I mean, those two guys work so well together. And I think that we saw that on display in this game. When you need your pass rush to come through, when you're wanting to play coverage all game and get your front four to just provide the majority of it and force Jake Browning to make tough, tight window throws, you can rely on guys like Nick Bonito and Jonathan Cooper to get the job done. So those two guys, to me, they get a game ball after this game for sure.
Their sack that they had together was poetic because, you almost would have felt like they would have cut Jake Browning in half with how they just came off the edge. It was almost like a race to get to the quarterback. Just love to see it there. I mean, this was just, once again, a dominant performance by the Broncos defensively here, holding the Bengals to 159 total yards of offense. And you know what? Might as well give a game ball here to Vance Joseph. I mean, for him to not dial up pressure the rate in which we've seen him so far normally, it's a lot of restraint there. I'm sure it was a little abnormal for him being on the sideline saying, okay, we're not going to send 5 or 6. We're just going to send 4 here and lock up. But I think it was the necessary game plan, especially with the fact that the Bengals went with the quick passing attack. I'm going to give Vance Joseph his flowers here today.
Yeah, I like that pick as well. I think when you come out and you don't want to necessarily put a bunch out there in terms of those exotic blitz packages that he likes to use. Yeah, we know the Eagles are going to look at the entire spectrum of these first 4 games when they study the film, but you don't want to put something out there against the Bengals in a game that you feel like you can win with your front 4. You don't want to put anything out there that's a new wrinkle or something like that you can potentially save for whatever you're going to throw at them this week. So that's where I think the Broncos really have to build right now, Cody. Obviously, we're excited about the win. You don't want to just flush it down the toilet and forget about it immediately, but they do have a short week to play the Eagles. You travel out east, you play in the early window. This has been a tough scenario for the Broncos in recent years. And even under Sean Payton, I mean, it's been really tough for this team to go out east to play in that early window. But you know what? Last year, they went up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were able to do something pretty special in that game as well. And look, the Broncos are due in a game like this. They've been blown out by the Ravens. They've been blown out by the Buffalo Bills. They've lost close games to other teams with winning records. Like, this is the time for them now to go and make a sort of a statement. The last big statement they made was that big win against the Bucs. This is your real chance now to say, hey, like, we're a legit contender in the AFC. And I think they could do it. I'm not saying they will do it. I'm not guaranteeing anything, but I think they can go do it this week against the Eagles.
The conversations get a little interesting because the Broncos aren't favored at all in this game. And if they can go out there and compete and find a way to win, man, it changes the conversations. And all of a sudden, those expectations that we were talking about prior, maybe we could start investing in those a little bit. Again, I still think we pump the brakes on the Super Bowl contender talk until they show that they could be consistent and win against some of these good teams. But they did exactly what they should against a team that they should have beaten. And I love that. One more honorable game ball here. I don't know if they mentioned this on the broadcast, Sarah, or if it got pinpointed out, but every time the Broncos would bring Alex Palczewski in and he'd report as eligible, when the refs would get on the mic and say number 63 is reported as eligible, the stadium erupted like every single time. It's fantastic. I don't know if the broadcast picked it up on that, but I was just like, you know what? That's pretty dang good.
Yeah, they didn't mention that. I noticed it listening in. I'm like, man, the fans really love Palczewski. And then unfortunately, he goes and gets called for the blindside block, which is the
Weak
dumbest
call.
that is the dumbest penalty I've ever heard of. Even Troy Aikman and Joe Buck, Cody, they were bored during this game. They were undoubtedly bored. There was too many flags. They were like so frustrated by it. And Troy Aikman literally he had no words when he found out what the penalty call was. He was like, he's like, I'm just going to bite my tongue. I'm not going to say anything. He said, I can't remember the exact thing that he said, but it was basically like, I get it that it's a good penalty call. It's just a completely unnecessary penalty or something like that. But man, yeah, Palczewski got done dirty by the NFL rule makers these days for a block that, man, that would have been celebrated on some segment featuring Tom Jackson and Randy Moss back in the day. He laid the boom, and I don't know. I think he was a key part of that run game getting going as well.
Yeah, he was. That's why his name was called so many times as being eligible, which was great. But, look, Broncos Country victory Monday, I'd say, or late victory Tuesday is here for everyone in Broncos Country. Now you enjoy it. And then the sights, they shift to the Philadelphia Eagles because the Broncos, short week ahead of them as they have to prepare for the defending Super Bowl champions. Make sure you hit the subscribe to that follow button wherever you get your podcast. Sarah and I will have you covered for all the post-game recap as well, the aftermath of it on tomorrow's episode of the show. Plus, Crossover Thursday is creeping up very close here as Sarah's going to sit down with Locked On Eagles as well. We got a lot to break down for you here this week on the show. We appreciate you, Broncos Country. We'll see you next time.